Well, the spring portal is officially closed, or so we thought. We're going to go through all of the players that have committed to UCF so far and all of the players, one in particular, that are leaving the night. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Charge On. As always, I'm your host, Sean Green. Thank you so much for tuning in this Friday. As always, we truly, truly appreciate it, especially in this offseason where, it wasn't crazy for a little bit. And it's still not crazy. We're going to kind of go through all of the players that have committed to UCF, what they did at their previous spot, how we think they could be integrated into the roster. And then we're going to get through all of the players that have dipped and have entered the portal. Now, one of the things that Scott Frost has made clear at the end of spring was that the main goal is to keep the players here, the players that they recruited, brought in through the transfer portal, the players that they sought after when Gus left. That was their main goal. And I think that when you look at what's happened so far, they've mostly done that. But I want to start with Chasen Johnson. Now, I don't want to spend too much time on it because this is kind of just the craziness that ensued with Chasen Johnson. But I think this is, to Scott Frost's point about keeping the players here and building the roster that way and not wanting to lose any of your key guys. That was his main goal, and he accomplished that. But Chasen Johnson ultimately is the one guy that really, and again, we'll go through, that really was going to probably be a starter. There's probably one more that had a shot, but Chasen Johnson was the guy. Now, as you all remember, Chasen, I think he was originally committed to Pitt, if I'm not mistaken, in high school, decommitted from Pitt, then committed to UCF, signed with UCF, had a really good true freshman year, had some ups, had some downs, but you saw the development and where it could go. Then entered the portal, committed to USC, signed with SMU, then signed with UCF, got out of whatever SMU's thing was, came to UCF, played spring, and then we talked to Chasen for the very last practice for spring for UCF, and he talked about how much of a good coach Scott Frost is, how much he enjoys, he's a real coach, feel like you could talk to him, how he just wanted to be back at UCF, blah, blah, blah. And what do you know, he's in the portal again and most likely going to USC. So I kind of want to talk about the mindset for UCF fans. This is not a rip on Chasen Johnson, even though I think you are going to have some of these players in this new era that do this. You see it around the country right now where a player joined a team before spring started and now they're leaving after spring started. And I think for players, it comes down to a couple things. It comes down to opportunity. We've kind of talked about this on the show recently. And if I'm a player and I'm going to a school, it's a couple reasons. A, money. B, opportunity. So for Chasen Johnson, there was both those things at UCF. But when you put money ahead of opportunity usually will, if you're getting paid a lot of money, opportunity will kind of follow you. And I think for a lot of players, I think most of the players at UCF that enter the portal, and we'll give the list here in a second, left because of opportunity. They weren't getting the opportunity at UCF that they felt they needed. They were probably not going to play a whole lot in the next year, and they left UCF with the hope that they will get an opportunity to play. Then after that, they will, if they do good, they will get paid more and be able to kind of pick their future that they want. Chasen Johnson was very sought after when he first entered the portal. And I think I'm not going to disparage a player's character or moral compass, because I don't think that's right. At the end of the day, and I know it's hard and for UCF fans and fans in general in college football to not be upset when a player does this, especially the whirlwind that has been Chasen Johnson. But it is hard for an 18, 19-year-old when schools are vying for you and throwing a bunch of money at you to stay committed to where you are. When you know you'll get the opportunity at another spot and they're throwing a bunch of money, at the end of the day, it's hard to say no. And I think in this case for UCF, I don't know the number that they gave Chasen Johnson when he came back. It might have been the same. They might have said, if you want to come back, we're going to give you the same. I have no idea. But when you have a school like USC potentially giving you double, and again, I have no idea. I'm just guessing. At that point, it's hard to compete. You don't find a lot of RJ Harvey sometimes. You don't have a lot of those. RJ Harvey could have easily, after, not this past season, but the season before, after the season he could have picked up the phone. There were teams calling him, and he would have made a lot more money elsewhere. But he chose to stick at UCF. And I think a majority of the players are like that, but you do have a couple players that prioritize financial stability for their family over loyalty to a specific program. So, has it been a whirlwind with Chasen? Yes. Do I think it's going to work out? I have no idea. But he chose financial stability over loyalty to UCF. And does that suck? Yes, but I think a lot of UCF fans are just tired in general of the whirlwind that was the Chasen Johnson roller coaster. And we got back on the roller coaster, but it was one of those things where it started and it broke, and we just get off. And if it comes back up again, great, but we're not getting back on the roller coaster. That roller coaster can take off. We're not getting back on it because we got scared that it broke down again. It broke down. We got back on. We rode it one more time. They wanted to ride it one more time. It broke down right as soon as we were going. We got off. We said no more. That's my Chasen Johnson analogy. So wish Chasen nothing but the best, but we're going to leave it at that and move on. Now let's talk about some of the other players that are leaving. We've kind of mentioned these players. Some of them have picked new schools. Dylan Risk going to Stanford. I really like that for him. I'm excited to watch Stanford games now. Nobody's excited to watch Stanford games. I'm excited to watch Stanford games. Walclair Flynn going to Georgia. Again, I think Walclair Flynn is going to have a really good career. I just think he wasn't getting enough opportunities here. And I think some players passed him up on the depth chart. I think a change of scenery, especially under that coaching staff, is going to be huge. Traquan Fegans is going to Jack State. We will see him first game of the season. Aiden Fettigan, punter, is going to Tulsa. Marcus Downs. DJ McCormick is going to USF. Don't like that. I like DJ. Don't like going to USF, but I understand wanting to probably stay in state. So I get that. Brandon Jacob, Quay Birdsong, Casey Stokes, Chase Malamala, Grant Reddick, Cedric Hawkins. This one, Andrew Harris. We'll talk about it in a second. Elijah Brown, Shad Presley, Kevin Kerrigan, Quentin Johnson, Jakai Leftwich, and Joff Dornswall. Andrew Harris is the one that hurts the most over this kind of new bit that have entered. He was fighting for a starting linebacker position. Obviously, I do think he lost out on that, or it could have been two things. Could have been lost out, or at the end of the day, just wanted a more solidified spot. We don't know where Andrew Harris is going to go. I think Maryland makes a lot of sense to go with his brother. But, I think he has so much potential, and I really like the way he plays. And it definitely, that one hurts a little for UCF, just because I think the depth there, he was a really good depth piece if he wasn't starting. He could start. I think he's got the potential to be a really good player. So that one hurts. All the rest of them, though, they were not going to be a factor on UCF this year. They just weren't. I mean, you have some guys on there that I think had a lot of potential, like a Marcus Downs. That one hurts. But you brought in like a Horace Lockett. So it kind of evens out on some of them. Now, Marcus Downs is younger, so that's where it kind of hurts. Quay Birdsong, same thing. Younger guy. Moved over to safety this spring. Looked like it was going really well. He enters the portal. Brandon Jacob. That was the case of you brought in a transfer from Maryland. Orlando kid comes home, plays spring, and then enters the portal again. So that's kind of where you have those kind of instances. Now, Brandon Jacob, I don't know if was going to start. I think there's a couple guys that are above him. But that's where it gets a little tricky. You bring in players from the portal, and if they aren't getting the opportunity that they think they deserve or need, they're going to go right back in the portal. And I'm sure a lot of these players will get on their feet somewhere. But that's kind of the list. And going full circle to what I was talking about at the beginning, Scott Frost said we don't want to lose our key guys. We don't want to lose the guys on this roster. We're going to lose some. That's inevitable. But we don't want to lose the guys that are going to make impacts. And I think ultimately, you had two out of, I didn't count, but two guys that I think had a chance to make a significant impact, being Chasen Johnson and Andrew Harris. And I think Chasen Johnson, it's very rare you find a player like that is very wishy-washy with where he's going to go, right? Besides that, it's a lot of players that had potential that maybe just want to play a little bit sooner and weren't going to maybe get the opportunity this season. So we wish all those guys the best. But as you see in a little bit, we're going to go through the, I think, 8 to 9 guys that UCF has recently acquired and got committed from the transfer portal. As we know, portal giveth, portal taken away or take away, something to that effect. And UCF has added some pieces, and I'm going to give my thoughts, but let's go through some of the most recent signings for UCF. So Jaden McDonald, linebacker. He's from Virginia Tech. He's got 2 years of eligibility left. He had visits scheduled for UCF, Colorado, and West Virginia, all Big 12 schools. He ultimately chose to come to UCF. He's played in 25 games for the Hokies and 8 starts. So, again, experience. I look at it as this more of a depth piece when you're looking at the linebackers that UCF has lost. They lost DJ McCormick. They lost Quay Birdsong technically, but technically not. He moved to safety. You lost Andrew Harris. You lost Quentin Johnson. So you lost some linebacker depth. Granted, UCF has built up a lot of linebacker depth, not just for this year, but in the next year and the next year. Like in 2026, as we've talked about, and we're going to talk about the guys that have committed for 2026 in the next couple of weeks, but they have a good chunk of linebackers that they've already kind of had committed. So the guys that have entered the portal, it's not shocking because they see the influx of linebackers coming. I think a guy like Jaden McDonald is to kind of supplement some of those losses with an addition as a good depth piece. Chris Domercan, wide receiver from Chattanooga, 6'1". He has 1 year left. Big play guy, 17.3 yards per catch last year. He had 36 receptions for 640 yards and 2 touchdowns. If you go through, they lost Chasen Stokes to the portal. And in terms of receivers, I think that was it. Now, they dealt with some injuries. Day Farmer down for the year. Marcus Burke was injured in spring. So I think this is a receiver piece that they can bring in depth. You're going to hear me say it a lot. He could make an impact, but I think coming in this late might be a little tough, especially at the receiver position. But like we said, there's a lot of young guys in that room that you think are really good, and we've seen it, they are, but how much can you rely on them in season? Are they going to be bona fide starters, or are you going to need a guy that has a lot of experience, maybe hasn't played on that level that you would have liked, but can fill in and create some depth for you there? Jaden Williams, safety from FAU. He has 1 year left as well. Obviously joins Philip Dunham and Coach Brandon Harris coming from FAU. It's starting to be a farm system from FAU, which makes sense. Scott Frost added a couple FAU staffers. So there's a lot of intel on these players. And Philip Dunham is going to be a starter. So if Jaden Williams is anywhere near as good or even just comparable, then I think he's a guy that you could see have an impact. Philip Dunham was really impressive in spring. Obviously, at the safety position, you lose Brandon Jacob. You lose Cedric Hawkins. You lose a young player in Jashad Presley. So you lost 3 of those guys, and you're supplementing that with adding 1. I don't think Scott Frost, I don't know if they're going to add any more players. This is just what's in there now. But as you know, the defensive back room is extensive right now. So I think losing 3 kind of DB type, or technically Traquan Fegans is DB, but losing 4 doesn't really hurt them as much as it would have if they were really struggling to have some depth. So this is a good add there. Jefferson LaFondon, defensive tackle from Bethune-Cookman, 6'3", has 3 years left. This is a guy that's young. He has a lot of good tape from last year, and I think they have a lot to work with. Kenny Martin obviously loses Marcus Downs, like we've said, loses one of his guys, supplements it with a very similar age as Marcus Downs in Jefferson, and I think taking a step up, coming from Bethune-Cookman to UCF, I think there's a lot to work with. He's still raw, but this is a perfect add in the sense of creating an extra piece for depth on the defensive tackle side and kind of working him up and seeing what we can mold out of him. I think having a guy like Horace Lockett come in is going to be perfect for him. Perfect for John Walker too. Like, this is building a team through young guys, even when you have to go into the portal. And again, Bethune-Cookman's not a big school. You've noticed that. The only big school so far has been Virginia Tech in terms of P4. And you'll see that kind of as we go down. For the most part, it's a lot of G5 or G6 schools that we're getting these players from. More opportunity. The players that you're going for are not necessarily going for the money, but for the opportunity. Owen Spell, I like this one. Offensive tackle, 6'8", 310. Tell me that's not what you want backing up on one of the tackle spots. 6'8", 310 from Limestone. And if that name rings a bell, which it probably didn't ring a bell about a couple months ago, but it does now, that's the school that DJ Black was just at before he transferred to UCF. He has 3 years remaining. And he went from the NAIA to Division II, now to the Big 12. So I think they added a couple offensive tackles. And I think with both of them, I'm going to give a little bit of a spiel. These are depth moves. I think UCF is pretty set on who their probably starting 5 is with just how we saw in spring. Now, things can change. Injuries can happen. A lot can happen in the next however many months. But I think the one thing we did look at is the depth kind of struggled in spring. It was way better towards the end of spring, but the depth on the offensive line, where we thought was going to be a real positive, didn't look as strong as we had anticipated. So I think Scott Frost and the staff saw that and said, we need to go get a little bit more depth just to be safe. They did lose a Chase Malamala. They did lose a Jakaya Leftwich. They did lose a Walt Claire Flynn. So they lost some offensive linemen. So it was always going to happen where they go into the portal and grab a couple more. But it is also because I think they want to make sure they shore up depth even more. They got rid of, Jakaya Leftwich probably wasn't going to play. He was injured, I believe. I think he was injured. And they were looking at him as a depth piece. But I think getting Jakaya Leftwich out, bringing a guy like Owen Spell in, has a lot to prove. I think it could pay dividends for UCF. Davi Belfort. I'm not going to talk too much about Davi. 4 years left. We talked about him a little last week. But I will say, I did go back and I watched the footage. And thank you for everybody making sure I said the name right. He's a stud. He is a stud. I think his accuracy could be a little better. I think he's got wheels. So I'm intrigued to see the development. It seems like Mackenzie Milton, it is very reminiscent. He is recruiting versions of himself. Like, not exact versions, but just the smaller quarterback that can run. And it is very reminiscent of that. But at the end of the day, a good add. You needed to add somebody from the portal, and I think Davi has a bright future if he could develop right. So good add there. No Rulas. I love the name. Kicker from James Madison. He has 1 year left. They needed a kicker. We said it. That was a major position of need. No Rulas was 16 to 20 on field goals last year. And he made a 52-yarder as his long. I think he made a 50-plus yarder against North Carolina and Appalachian State. So, listen, I'll take what we can get at this point. We'll see. You really can't talk kickers too much, because until you see them kick a football, you really don't know how good they're going to be or not. At the end of the day, Grant Reddick was one of the best kickers. I think he was the number one kicker in the country. And look how that turned out. So, you never know. But no Rulas would be a hell of a kicker name to start for UCF for sure. This next one, if I butcher the name, I apologize. Amaric Kumba. I think I said that perfectly. But if I didn't, please let me know. Amaric Kumba was an edge at Michigan. 6'5". I like the size off the edge. If you're 6'4" and above coming off the edge, I'm a happy camper. He has 3 years left, still relatively young. He only played one game at Michigan. And he wasn't a big-time recruit. So I think this is another instance where you can't necessarily look at the school that they're coming from. You have to look at all the other factors. I think when it came out, he committed, and we got a Michigan guy. People are like, oh, let's go. But this is very similar to, old time, like Cam Good. He's not necessarily a, guy that's going to fill in right from the jump as a starter. He is a depth piece if some guys go down. But I am intrigued to see what he could do. Again, there's a reason he went to Michigan, talented enough to get an offer from Michigan. So I am intrigued to see what he can do there. And then finally, Connor Meadows, offensive tackle from Tennessee State. He's 6'4" with 2 years left. And he has 24 not 24 starts. I apologize. Handwriting bad. 13 starts. He has 25 pressures allowed and 3 sacks allowed. And for the final time, I know you guys are probably sick of me saying it and are like, Sean, if I hear this word one more time, I'm going to unsubscribe. Please don't do that. Depth. This is that type of piece. But if you look, you need it. I think it's one of those things where I'm really intrigued by all the offensive linemen that have been brought in. I've talked about that on the show. And I think bringing in an Owen Spell and a Connor Meadows this cycle, potentially adding more, we'll see. I think it really gives you just an array of extra opportunities. What can these guys do? You learn about them. They have 2 years remaining for Connor and 3 years remaining for Owen. You can learn quick if they're going to be guys. And if they're not, you can move off of them. But I think what they've added has been able to help out the roster come August. You're adding guys that could help you if stuff goes wrong. And I think for UCF, that is a major, major, major thing. Because we looked at the beginning of spring and we're like, where's the depth? Who's going to help if a guy goes down? What's that going to look like? And I think in this cycle so far, what they've lost, they didn't lose anything major. what they've gained in the losses. They might have lost a player, but they supplemented it with a new guy that could be just as good and potentially better. Who knows? But some of these guys only have 1 year left. So you're going to have to continue adding in the years to come, specifically next year, because this roster does have a lot of guys with only 1 year left. And we're not really talking about it right now, but it's going to really become a young team in the not so distant future. So good ads by UCF. What do you guys think? Drop it down in the comments below. Let me know. Is there a specific player that you are really intrigued about? Is there a player that left that you are really upset that is not on the roster? Drop it down in the comments section below. All right, everybody. That's going to do it for this week's episode of Charge On. A lot of exciting stuff coming to the channel. A lot of exciting stuff. I think if you're a UCF fan, I'm not going to get too ahead of myself. If you're a UCF fan and you want some different type of content, because to be fair, a lot of it's a lot of the same stuff. We're talking about the same stuff. We got some stuff in the works I think is going to change the game, potentially. We'll see. Long ways away. You're not going to see most of this. You will see something next week, if all goes well. That is going to be really fun. So be on the lookout next week for maybe a little bit different episode of Charge On. But you will see that when you see it. All right, everybody, I hope that little tease got you a little excited. A little bit of juice in May as we are on the long road to a football season. All right, everybody, this has been Charge On. We will see you next week.